A black single dad's first date was going so well. In fact, it was going better than well. It felt like oxygen after 3 years of holding his breath. Tyrone had finally found a rhythm with a woman who didn't look at him with pity. The chemistry was undeniable, the laughter was genuine, and for the first time since his wife passed, the future didn't look like a long, dark tunnel. It was going so well, until the woman sitting across from him, a woman who seemed perfect in every gentle way, suddenly froze. She pulled out her phone, her hands shaking violently, and showed him a heartbreaking photo before whispering the words that would change everything. "You can leave. I'm a single mom." She wasn't talking about a shared custody arrangement or a busy schedule filled with soccer practice. She was offering him an immediate out, a chance to run before he got trapped in a reality that had scared every other man away. Tyrone sat there, his heart hammering against his ribs, realizing that the next 5 seconds wouldn't just define his night, they would define the rest of his life. Most men would have asked for the check. Most men would have offered a polite excuse about an early morning meeting and walked out the door. But Tyrone wasn't most men, and he knew something about broken hearts and silent houses that nobody else in that restaurant could ever understand. If you have ever felt like your personal struggles made you unlovable, or if you've ever had to be strong when you felt like crumbling inside, then this story is exactly for you. The rain was drumming relentlessly against the window pane of the Roasted Bean Bistro, blurring the city lights into streaks of gold and silver. It was 8:45 p.m. Inside, the air smelled of roasted hazelnuts, old wood, and the faint, comforting scent of rain on pavement. It was the kind of atmosphere designed for romance, for hushed conversations and holding hands. But at table 4, in the far corner of the room, the temperature seemed to have dropped 20 degrees. Hannah was shaking. It wasn't a subtle tremble. Her hands were vibrating so hard that the silver bracelet on her wrist clicked softly, rhythmically against the table surface. She had just turned her phone screen toward Tyrone, revealing a photo that was the source of her sudden, paralyzing panic. "His name is Sam," Hannah said, her voice sounding brittle, like dry leaves being crushed underfoot. "He has severe cerebral palsy and epilepsy. He requires 24-hour care. He can't walk. He can't speak. He will never leave home." Tyrone looked at the image on the screen. It showed a boy, roughly 7 years old, seated in a complex, specialized wheelchair. His head lolled slightly to the right, supported by a padded headrest. A feeding tube was taped gently to his cheek. He had Hannah's striking blue eyes, but they looked distant, staring at something beyond the frame that only he could see. It was a picture of innocence, but also a picture of immense, overwhelming responsibility. "My ex-husband walked out the day we got the diagnosis," Hannah continued, the words tumbling out of her fast, as if she needed to get the confession over with before she lost her nerve. "He said he didn't sign up for a broken life. He said he wanted a legacy, not a burden. Every man I've met since then, the moment they see Sam, the moment they realize I can't go on spontaneous trips or that my life revolves around doctors, therapists, and seizure logs, they leave." She pulled the phone back and shoved it into her purse with frantic movements, fumbling with the zipper. She grabbed the strap of her bag, her knuckles white. "So go ahead," she whispered, her eyes filling with tears that threatened to spill over her mascara. "You can leave, please. Just go before I start crying in this restaurant. I understand. It's too much baggage. I'm just a single mom with a burden no one wants." The pain in her voice was raw, a physical thing that hung heavy in the air between them. She wasn't rejecting him. She was preemptively breaking her own heart to save him the trouble of doing it later. She was pushing him away because she was convinced that leaving was inevitable. She had lived this script too many times before. Tyrone sat frozen. His large hands rested on the dark wood of the table. He looked at the woman shaking in front of him. He saw the fatigue etched under her eyes that concealer couldn't quite hide, the specific kind of exhaustion that comes from sleeping with one ear open for years. He saw the fierce, terrifying love she had for a boy who couldn't speak her name, and he saw her reaching for the handle of her purse, preparing to flee the shame of another rejection. He didn't speak immediately. He reached into his back pocket and pulled out his leather wallet. Hannah flinched. She thought he was reaching for a credit card to pay the bill and expedite his exit. She began to stand up, the chair scraping loudly against the floorboards, drawing the attention of a couple at the next table. "I'm sorry, I have to go," she choked out, turning away. "Hannah," Tyrone said. His voice was a low, steady rumble. "Sit down." "I can't—" "Please," he said, and this time there was no room for argument in his tone, only a gentle authority. "Just for a minute. Sit down." She hesitated, caught between the urge to run and the command in his voice. Slowly she sank back into the chair, wrapping her arms around her midsection as if she were freezing. She wouldn't look at him. She stared at the candle flickering in the center of the table, waiting for the polite letdown. "You're a great girl, but the timing isn't right. I'm just not ready for that kind of responsibility." But Tyrone didn't open the cash fold of his wallet. He flipped it open to the plastic sleeve behind his driver's license. He slid the wallet across the table, right next to her trembling hand. "Look," he said softly. To understand why Tyrone didn't run, you have to understand the silence that lived in his own house. You have to understand the world he inhabited before he walked into that bistro. 48 hours before this date, the silence in Tyrone's living room was loud enough to ring in his ears. It was 8 p.m. on a Tuesday. He was sitting on the edge of his beige sofa, staring at a pile of small plastic hair beads scattered on the coffee table. They were pink and purple, bright colors that clashed with the muted masculine tones of the room. He had spent the last hour wrestling with his 6-year-old daughter Maya's hair, trying to twist it into braids that looked decent enough for school the next day. He wasn't a professional. His fingers were large and calloused, better suited for drafting architectural blueprints or handling construction materials than manipulating tiny sections of hair. But after 3 years of doing it alone, he had developed a gentle, rhythmic patience. "Ow, Daddy, that pulls!" Maya had whined, shifting in her seat on the floor between his knees. "Sorry, baby girl," Tyrone had murmured, loosening his grip. "Daddy's trying. We want you looking fresh for picture day, right?" "Mommy did it faster," Maya said quietly. The words hit him like a physical blow to the chest. Tyrone paused, his hands hovering over her hair. The air in the room seemed to get thinner. "I know, sweetie," he said, his voice thick. "I know she did." 3 years. That was how long it had been since the aneurysm. It hadn't been a dramatic car crash or a long, drawn-out battle with illness. It was just a Tuesday, much like this one. His wife, Keisha, had been folding laundry in the bedroom. She had called out that she had a headache, a sharp pain behind her eyes. Tyrone had gone to the kitchen to get her a glass of water and some aspirin. By the time he walked back down the hallway, the glass of water in his hand, she was on the floor. 20 minutes later, the paramedics declared her gone. Just like that, the world had tilted on its axis, and Tyrone had slid off the edge. He remembered the funeral. He remembered the rain. But mostly he remembered the terrifying realization that he was now the sole anchor for a 3-year-old girl who didn't understand why Mommy wouldn't wake up. After he finished Maya's hair that night, he tucked her into bed. He read her 2 stories, did the voices for all the characters, and checked under the bed for monsters. When he finally closed her door, the house felt empty. It was a suffocating kind of empty, where the hum of the refrigerator sounded like a roar. He walked into the kitchen and leaned against the counter. His phone buzzed. It was his sister, Simone. "Did you check the app? Don't leave me on read, Ty." Tyrone groaned. Simone had practically forced him to download the dating app a month ago. She had sat him down, looked him in the eye, and said, "Ty, mourning is necessary. Suffering forever is a choice. Keisha wouldn't want you to be a monk. She'd want you to live. You're burying yourself alive in this house." He had resisted. Dating felt like a betrayal. It felt like admitting that Keisha was really gone, that she wasn't just in the other room folding laundry. It felt like trying to replace a masterpiece with a photocopy. But the silence was getting harder to bear. The loneliness was a physical ache in his bones. He picked up the phone. He had matched with a woman named Hannah 3 weeks ago. She was different from the others. Her profile didn't have filters or curated travel photos from exotic locations. It was just her, smiling in a garden, with kind eyes that seemed to hold a secret sadness. They had been messaging every night. She didn't ask the usual shallow questions like, "What do you do for fun?" or "What kind of car do you drive?" Instead, she asked, "What made you smile today?" or "What is the hardest part of your week?" When he told her he was a widower, she didn't offer the generic "I'm sorry for your loss" or stop replying because it was too heavy. She had simply written, "I hope you have people who remind you of the sun on the cloudy days. Grief is love with nowhere to go." That sentence had stuck with him. It was profound. It was real. It told him that she knew pain too. Tonight, he had finally agreed to meet her. "You got this, Ty," he whispered to the empty kitchen, trying to convince himself. "Just coffee, just conversation. You aren't marrying her, you're just having coffee. You're just trying to be a person again." Grief has a strange way of making us feel like we have to face the world in solitary confinement. We build walls to protect our hearts, not realizing we are locking ourselves in. If you've ever had to be strong for someone else while you were hurting inside, hit that like button, because you know exactly what Tyrone was feeling. The memory of that empty house faded as the scene shifted back to the bistro. The smell of the hazelnut coffee was strong again. When Tyrone had first walked into the roasted bean earlier that evening, he had been sweating. He had smoothed out his button-down shirt 10 times in the reflection of the shop window. He felt rusty. He felt guilty. When Hannah walked in, the air in the room seemed to shift. She was prettier than her photos. She wore a simple navy dress and a cardigan, clutching her purse with white-knuckled tension. She scanned the room, eyes wide, looking ready to bolt. When her eyes locked on his, her shoulders dropped an inch, though the anxiety remained in her posture. "Tyrone?" she had breathed, offering a shy smile. "Hannah," he said, standing up. "You look beautiful." The first hour of the date had been miraculous. It was the usual dance of two strangers trying to find a rhythm, but they found it quickly. They talked about the terrible parking downtown, the weather, and his job as an architect. Hannah worked as a freelance editor, which allowed her to work from home. "I like the quiet," she had said, tracing the rim of her cup. "It helps me focus. The world gets too loud sometimes." "I hear that. My house is only quiet after 8. Before that, it's a tornado of cartoons and hair geeds." Hannah had frozen for a split second then. It was subtle, a tiny hitch in her breath, but Tyrone noticed. He was hyper-aware of shifts in emotion. Grief did that to a person. It made you a detective of sadness. "You have kids?" she asked, her voice carefully neutral. "One," Tyrone said, unable to hide the pride in his voice. "Maya. She's 6. She's the boss of the house. I just pay the mortgage." He waited for the question about his wife. It always came. Where is the mom? Is she in the picture? Is it a drama-filled co-parenting situation? But Hannah didn't ask. Instead, she looked down at her lap, her fingers twisting a silver ring on her thumb. "That sounds nice, being the boss." "It has its moments," Tyrone admitted. "It's just us. My wife passed away 3 years ago." Hannah's head snapped up. Her blue eyes filled with sudden, intense water. It wasn't just pity, it was a flash of shared pain. "I'm so sorry, Tyrone. I can't imagine." "We manage," he said, trying to keep the mood light. "But dating? Man, I feel like a fish trying to ride a bicycle. I don't know the rules anymore." Hannah laughed then, a genuine melodic sound that made Tyrone smile. "There are no rules," she said, "just survival." The connection was deepening. Tyrone felt safe talking to her. He found himself telling her about the day of the funeral, how it rained, and how he had been terrified he wouldn't be able to braid Maya's hair. Hannah listened intently, her hand resting on the table inches from his. "You're a good father, Tyrone," she said softly. I can see it in your face when you say her name." "I try. I just don't want her to feel the hole in her life, you know?" "I know," Hannah whispered. She looked away, toward the window. Tyrone sensed the shift again. The wall was going up. He leaned forward. "Hannah? You okay?" That was when she checked her watch. It was 8:45 p.m. That was when the panic set in. That was when she showed him the picture of Sam and tried to leave, which brought them back to the present moment. The wallet on the table. Hannah stared at the wallet Tyrone had slid toward her. Her hand was still trembling. Slowly, she looked down at the plastic sleeve. It was a photograph. It wasn't a professional studio shot. It was grainy and slightly out of focus. It showed a woman, Keisha, sitting in a hospital bed, looking exhausted, no makeup, hair in a messy bun, but her smile was radiant, lighting up the dim room. In her arms, she held a tiny, swaddled newborn. "That was 3 days before she came home from the hospital," Tyrone said, his voice thick with emotion. "We didn't know then that Maya had a heart murmur. We spent the first 2 years of her life in and out of the ER. I remember nights where Keisha and I just sat on the floor and cried because we were so tired we couldn't stand. I remember the smell of the hospital soap. I remember the fear that every breath she took might be her last." Hannah looked up from the photo to Tyrone's face. The fear in her eyes was starting to be replaced by confusion. "When Keisha died," Tyrone said, his voice lowering to a whisper that cut through the bistro's ambient noise, "I didn't just lose my wife. I lost my teammate. I became a single dad to a grieving little girl who screamed every night for 6 months because she wanted her mommy. I walked the floors with her till sunrise. I cleaned up the vomit when she got sick from crying. I learned to be the mother and the father." He reached across the table. Slowly, deliberately, he placed his large, warm hand over Hannah's trembling ones. She didn't pull away. "You think you're telling me you have baggage," Tyrone said, looking her dead in the eye. "But what I hear is that you are a warrior. You think Sam is a burden? I look at that picture and I see a mother who stayed when the father ran. I see a woman who loves so hard it scares people." Tears spilled over Hannah's cheeks, tracking through her foundation. She let out a soft gasp. "You don't understand, Tyrone. It's hard, Tyrone. It's so hard. It's not just loving him. It's the diapers. It's the lifting. It's the staring strangers." "I know it is," he said. "I know I can't understand exactly what your day looks like. I know raising Maya isn't the same as caring for Sam. But I know what it feels like to be the only one holding the sky up so it doesn't crush your child." He squeezed her hand gently. "My wife died," he said. "That's my reality. It scares women away too. They think I'm still in love with a ghost. They think they can never compete. We both have scars, Hannah. We both have lives that didn't go according to the plan." Hannah looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time that night, the defensive wall crumbled completely. She let out a sob, covering her mouth with her free hand. "He needs to be turned every 2 hours at night," she choked out, her vulnerability spilling onto the table. "I haven't slept a full night in 7 years. I'm so tired, Tyrone." "Then maybe," Tyrone said softly, "you need someone to bring you coffee in the morning, or someone to sit with him for an hour so you can take a nap." Hannah shook her head in disbelief. "Why? Why would you do that? You barely know me." "Because," Tyrone said, wiping a stray tear from his own eye, "I liked you before I knew about Sam, and now that I know you're fighting this battle alone, I think I like you even more. Integrity is rare, Hannah. Loyalty is rare." He pulled his hand back and took a sip of his cold coffee. "I'm not leaving," he stated firmly, "unless you want me to, but if you're telling me to leave because you think I'm weak, then you're wrong." Hannah laughed through her tears, a wet, ragged sound that was the most beautiful thing Tyrone had heard all night. She reached for a napkin and dabbed her eyes. "You're not weak, Tyrone. Neither are you." The waiter approached, sensing the tension, hesitating with the check. Tyrone waved him over with a smile. "We're good," Tyrone told the waiter. "We're just figuring some things out." He paid the bill. They walked out of the bistro into the cool night air. The rain had stopped, leaving the pavement slick and reflecting the city lights like a mirror. The air was fresh, smelling of wet asphalt and ozone. Hannah turned to him on the sidewalk. She looked exhausted, emotionally drained, but lighter somehow. Her shoulders weren't hunched up to her ears anymore.
"I have to get home to relieve the nurse," she said. "She leaves at 9:30. "I understand," Tyrone said. "Can I—" She hesitated, biting her lip. "Can I see you again? Even knowing everything?" Tyrone smiled. "I'd be offended if you didn't. Maybe next time we do something simpler. A walk? I can bring Maya. She's surprisingly good with other kids, even if she talks enough for 2 people. Hannah smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. It was a genuine, hopeful look that transformed her face. "Sam likes music. If she talks a lot, he'll probably love listening to her voice. He loves sound." "It's a date," Tyrone said. He watched her walk to her car. She stopped before opening the door and looked back at him. She didn't wave, she just nodded, a silent acknowledgement of the lifeline he had thrown her. It takes a special kind of strength to see the beauty in someone else's broken pieces. Do you think you could have handled a situation like Tyrone did? Let us know in the comments below. Tyrone walked to his own car, feeling the weight of the night. He knew it wouldn't be easy. Dating a single mom with a high-needs child was a mountain to climb. But as he unlocked his door, he thought of the empty space on his sofa and the silence in his house. He realized that he didn't want easy. He wanted real. He got into the car and checked his phone. There was a text from Mrs. Higgins, the babysitter, saying Maya was asleep. And below that, a new message from Hannah. "Thank you for not leaving." Tyrone typed back, his thumbs moving quickly. "I'm right where I'm supposed to be." But the story didn't end there. In fact, the hardest part was just beginning. Saying you will stay is one thing. Actually staying when the reality hits is another. The adrenaline of the romantic gesture fades, and the cold, hard logistics of life set in. 1 week later, Tyrone pulled up to a small ranch-style house in the suburbs. This wasn't a neutral bistro. This was Hannah's world. He noticed the wooden wheelchair ramp leading up to the front door immediately. It was well built but weathered, clearly used every single day. The front yard was neat, but there were no toys scattered around like at his house, no jump ropes, no chalk on the driveway. He took a deep breath, grabbed the bouquet of sunflowers from the passenger seat. He remembered her profile said she loved yellow because it reminded her of happiness, and walked up the ramp. His boots sounded loud on the wood. Hannah opened the door before he could knock. She was wearing jeans and a t-shirt, her hair in a ponytail. She looked tired, her eyes rimmed with red, but she smiled when she saw the flowers. "They're bright," she said, taking them. "Come in." The house smelled of lavender and something sharp, antiseptic. It was a clean smell, but clinical. In the corner of the living room, there was a lift system attached to the ceiling, a track that ran from the main room to the bedroom. There were monitors on the side tables. Baskets of medical supplies were neatly stacked. It looked half like a home, half like a clinic. "He's in the living room," Hannah said softly. "He's having a good day." Tyrone followed her. Sam was sitting in his chair by the window. He was bigger than he looked in the photo. His limbs were thin, and his hands were curled inward against his chest due to the spasticity. A feeding tube pump hummed rhythmically in the background, a metronome keeping time for their lives. Hannah watched Tyrone like a hawk. She was waiting for the flinch. She was waiting for him to look away in discomfort, or to ask a rude question, or to take a step back. She held her breath. Tyrone walked right up to the chair. He didn't hover at a distance. He crouched down so he was at eye level with the boy. He ignored the tubes. He ignored the chair. He looked right into Sam's eyes. "Hey, Sam," Tyrone said, his voice deep and warm. "I'm Tyrone. Your mom told me you like music." Sam couldn't answer. His head moved slightly, his eyes drifting toward the sound of Tyrone's voice. A small guttural sound came from his throat. "He's saying hello," Hannah said, her voice tight. "I figured," Tyrone said. He didn't stand up. He stayed crouched. "I have a daughter named Maya. She sings all the time. She's terrible at it, but don't tell her I said that." Sam's mouth twitched.
It might have been a spasm, or it might have been a smile. Tyrone chose to believe it was a smile. He reached out and lightly touched the boy's shoulder. It was a simple human gesture, but to Hannah it was monumental. Most people were afraid to touch Sam. They treated him like he was fragile glass or contagious. Tyrone stood up and looked at Hannah. "He's handsome. He's got your eyes." Hannah let out a breath she seemed to have been holding for 7 years. "Yeah, he does." The evening was quiet. They ordered takeout and ate in the kitchen while Sam watched a sensory video of colorful shapes moving to classical music. Tyrone helped Hannah carry a heavy box of diapers and medical supplies from the porch to the storage closet. He didn't make a big deal of it, he just did it. But dating is one thing, blending families is another, and 2 weeks later, Tyrone faced the true test. He had invited Hannah and Sam to the park. He brought Maya. He was terrified. Maya was loud. She was energetic. She'd never been around a child with disabilities before. Tyrone had tried to explain it to her in the car ride over. "Maya, Hannah's son Sam is different. He can't walk or talk like you. His brain works differently, so we have to be gentle, okay? No shouting." "Okay, Daddy," Maya had said, kicking her legs, but Tyrone wasn't sure she understood. When they arrived at the park, Hannah was unloading Sam's wheelchair from her van. It was a laborious process, involving ramps and locks. Tyrone jumped in to help, lifting the heavy frame while Hannah settled Sam into the seat. Maya stood on the grass, clutching her favorite book, The Very Hungry Caterpillar. She watched silently. Hannah looked nervous. She knew how cruel kids could be. She knew the stares. She knew the innocent questions that hurt like knives. Why is he broken? Why does he look like that? Once Sam was settled, Maya walked up to the wheelchair. She stood there, staring at the tubes, at the way Sam's head rested on the pad. Tyrone held his breath. "Please, Maya," he thought. "Please be kind." Maya looked at Sam. Then she looked at Hannah. "Can he hear?" Maya asked. "Yes," Hannah said, crouching down to Maya's level. "He can hear very well. He just can't talk back." "Oh," Maya said. She didn't run away to play on the slide. She didn't ask what was wrong with him. She simply sat down on the grass right in front of the wheelchair, crossing her legs. She opened her book. "I'm going to read to you," Maya announced to Sam. "This is a book about a bug that eats too much food. It's funny." She began to read, holding the book up high so Sam could see the colorful pictures. "In the light of the moon, a little egg lay on a leaf." Tyrone watched Sam. The boy's eyes locked onto Maya. His body, usually tense with spasticity, seemed to relax. He let out a happy, cooing sound, a vibration of pure joy at being included. Maya paused and looked up. "See? He likes the moon part." Hannah put a hand over her mouth. She was crying again, but this time it wasn't from sadness. It was relief. It was hope. Tyrone walked over and put his arm around Hannah's waist. She leaned into him, her head resting on his shoulder. "She's amazing," Hannah whispered. "They both are," Tyrone said. "Children often see with their hearts before they see with their eyes." If this moment warmed your spirit, please consider subscribing to join our community for more stories like this. But life isn't a montage of happy park visits. The real challenge came 3 months later. It was a Friday night. Tyrone and Hannah had planned a movie night at her place. Maya was at a sleepover with her cousins, so it was supposed to be a relaxing evening. Tyrone had brought popcorn and a comedy movie. They were 30 minutes into the film when Sam started coughing. It wasn't a normal cough. It was wet and rattling. Hannah froze. She immediately paused the movie and went to Sam's chair. "He's aspirating," she said, her voice shifting from relaxed girlfriend to medical professional in a split second. She wheeled him into the bedroom where the suction machine was. Tyrone followed. He watched as she expertly inserted a tube to clear Sam's airway. But the coughing didn't stop. Sam's face was turning red. His oxygen levels on the monitor began to beep, a shrill, terrifying sound. "His stats are dropping," Hannah said, panic creeping into her voice. "I can't get it clear." "What do you need?" Tyrone asked. He didn't panic. He stepped up. "I need the nebulizer," she said, pointing to a shelf, "and call the doctor on call." For the next hour, there was no romance, there was no comedy movie. There was only the harsh reality of keeping a fragile life safe. Tyrone held the nebulizer mask to Sam's face while Hannah worked the suction. He rubbed Sam's back. He spoke calmly to him, telling him it was okay, that they were there. When Sam finally stabilized, his breathing evening out, the room felt like a war zone. Wrappers and tubes were scattered everywhere. The smell of medicine was overpowering. Hannah slumped against the wall, sliding down until she hit the floor. She put her head in her hands and began to weep. It was the weeping of pure exhaustion. Tyrone sat down next to her. He put his arm around her. "I'm sorry," she sobbed. "I'm so sorry. This is my life. It's ugly. It's scary. You shouldn't have to deal with this." Tyrone took her face in his hands. "Hannah, look at me." She looked up, her eyes swollen. "I'm not going anywhere," he said. "We got his stats up. We did it. We're a team." "But it's too much," she whispered. "It is too much," Tyrone agreed, "for one person. That's why there's two of us now." That night, Tyrone didn't go home. He slept on the couch, waking up every 2 hours when Hannah's alarm went off to help her turn Sam. He learned the rhythm of her nights. He learned the sacrifice she made every single hour. Over the next 6 months, their lives merged completely. It was messy. It was hard. There were nights when Sam had seizures and their dinner plans had to be canceled as they rushed to the emergency room. Tyrone learned how to load the wheelchair into the van, a skill he mastered quickly. He learned how to feed Sam through the tube. He learned that love wasn't just flowers and dates. It was suction machines and sleepless nights. But there was joy, too, unexpected, blinding joy. There were the days when Maya would sit on Sam's lap in the wheelchair and they would race down the hallway, Tyrone pushing them while they both shrieked with laughter. There were the quiet Sunday mornings where Hannah would braid Maya's hair, her fingers far more nimble than Tyrone's, while telling her stories about strong women who changed the world. Tyrone watched his daughter bloom under the mother's touch again, and he watched Hannah bloom under the support of a partner. One evening, nearly a year after they met, Tyrone was in the kitchen washing dishes. The house was quiet. Sam was asleep. Maya was asleep in the spare room. Hannah walked in. She looked tired but happy. She wrapped her arms around him from behind and rested her cheek against his back. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" Tyrone asked, scrubbing a plate. "For staying. For not being scared. For loving us." Tyrone turned around and dried his hands. He lifted her chin so she was looking at him. "I didn't stay because I'm a saint, Hannah," he said. "I stayed because when I looked at you, I saw my future. I saw a family. I saw someone who wouldn't run when things got hard because you proved you don't run." He kissed her forehead. "And besides," he added with a grin, breaking the tension, "Maya needs someone who can actually braid hair. I was doing a terrible job. You saved me from going broke at the salon." Hannah laughed, and the sound echoed through the house, chasing away the silence that had lived there for so long. Tyrone thought back to the title of the story he had lived, "You Can Leave." Hannah had given him that choice. And sometimes, when he was exhausted, when the burden of 2 families seemed too heavy, he remembered that he could have walked away. He could have chosen the easy life. He could have found someone with less baggage. But then he would look at the living room. He would see Maya's drawing on the fridge next to Sam's medication schedule. He would see the way Sam's eyes lit up when he walked in the room. He would see Hannah asleep on the sofa, finally resting because she knew she wasn't the only one keeping watch anymore. He realized that love isn't about finding someone without baggage. It's about finding someone whose baggage matches yours so you can help each other carry it. It's about looking at the scary parts of life and saying, we can handle this together. They weren't just a black single dad and a white single mom anymore. They were a family, forged in the fire of loss and tempered by the strength of choosing each other every single day. Thank you for watching True Black Tales. If this story reminded you that you are worthy of love, no matter your struggles, share this with a friend who needs to hear it. And remember, sometimes the heaviest things in life are the ones most worth carrying.